So, John here, Autograph Fisherman, and this is a special video for me, very special to my heart, this organization. This is John with Men Ending Trafficking. Hi John, how are you?
Good, great to be with you this morning, John.
Great to have you here as the table falls. So, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself, introducing Men Ending Trafficking.
All right. Yeah, so thanks for the coffee, John. We're just here talking about human trafficking and the organization Men Ending Trafficking, which I helped start about 7 or 8 years ago. And so Men Ending Trafficking was just formed out of a need to engage men on the conversation of human trafficking. People think of human trafficking, particularly in Canada, where human trafficking almost entirely is comprised of sex trafficking of young women. People think of it as a women's issue. But when you really kind of get into the complexities of it, why does the issue that affects so many women exist in the first place? And that is the money. And where does the money come from? It comes from the men who purchase sexual services, guys who look like John and I. It's that behavior that fuels the demand for that crime. And so we formed Men Ending Trafficking out of a need to engage men in the conversation.
Cool. It is a sad thing. It really is a sad thing when you think about how big it is. And saying that, how big is the problem, human trafficking?
Yeah, well, I was noticing, John, that the majority of your viewers are based in Ontario. And so let's just look at that. Out of the cases of human trafficking across Canada, according to police statistics, the majority, about 2 out of 3, are happening in the province of Ontario. Most of those are happening in the Greater Toronto area. The Global Slavery Index says that conservatively we're probably looking at about 17,000 cases of human trafficking in the sex industry across Canada. So this is a case that this is a situation that is affecting more and more young people. It seems to be on the rise. I'm really hard pressed to find a junior high or a high school that doesn't have an active human trafficking problem. So these are real lives that are affected by the issue of human trafficking. The age of entry it is wide ranging. Some people don't get in until their adult years. On the other end of the scale, I've seen cases where young children have been exploited. But according to the work that I'm doing, we're observing about 15 and a half years old is roughly the age on average when a young woman gets lured into the sex industry.
So that's just, again, just crazy. 15. So, with it being such a huge, big problem, so much happening, so much money thrown into it, what can the little guy do to help prevent it?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. Because the average Joe might have a heart of compassion, might realize that this is a form of slavery. This is something that often involves violence, coercion. The young people who come out of the industry and try to heal are generally in very rough shape and have deep trauma. Often as well medical conditions, chronic medical conditions. So it's a huge problem. What can the average guy do? Well, if you look at Ontario has been the leading province in Canada to try to tackle this issue. In 2014, the government of Canada revised or came up with a new set of prostitution laws that were aimed at suppressing or controlling, reducing the amount of human trafficking in Canada. At the core of that legislation was a moratorium on the purchase of sexual services. That means prostitution had technically been legal in Canada historically, and now it wasn't anymore. It was not permitted under the law. But the provinces are responsible for, of course, implementing and enforcing the federal law in Canada. Ontario has come up with a very clear strategy to end human trafficking. That strategy includes police initiatives. So the enforcement in Ontario is not directed at the men that purchase sexual services. It is directed at human traffickers. And the theory behind that, I suppose, or the rationale, would be, let's not punish the average guy who purchases sexual services. The average guy who purchases sex is probably not a monster. Let's go after the real monsters. Let's go after the traffickers. But here's the thing. The traffickers are not being dissuaded by criminal prosecution. Mm-hmm. They're gang members. They want to be known as bad people, as thugs, as notorious. They have no moral problem trafficking young women. And we're losing this fight in Ontario because our enforcement is going towards the guys who aren't afraid of criminal prosecution. The rest of the money is going towards the recovery of victims. But, you know, I'm no economist, but I would rationalize that if you can reduce the number of victims, you'll need less services to look after the victims. You know, if you're preventing victimization in the first place. The province doesn't seem to comprehend that, or at least doesn't seem to be yet interested in that route. So there's no meaningful prevention, in my opinion, in the province of Ontario. So what could we be doing? We could really grapple with the reality of where we've got to in this society, and speak the truth. The purchase of sexual services is being protected by provinces across the country, though it's a criminal offense. We need to be, fostering the culture that the sexual services industry or prostitution is not appropriate. Now, some would argue, John, that there's a huge difference between human trafficking and those who willingly engage in prostitution. We're seeing such a blurry line between the two, and even those people who come out of the sex industry, even if there was no prostitution, even if they were just stripping, but they're coming out of the sex industry with great mental health issues, addictions, suicidal ideations, very, very difficult. So it's hard for us often to distinguish the long-term radical impact on a young woman's life based on whether she was trafficked or whether she was just there by choice in the sex industry. So sex industry is exploitative by nature. I can tell you that because I've been studying it for many, many years. And we want to engage men in the conversation to say this is not how young women should be treated. It uses them, it harms them, and if they make it through the recovery years, which can be very, very lengthy, their lives are never going to be the same.
I have one more question for you, and it may be a tough one, but I know you can handle it. there are people out there. There are two questions that I always get when I mention men ending trafficking, and you mentioned one of them is the people who choose to be in it, but another one is would it not be better to buy sex and go out and rape someone?
So there's a theory that often goes around that, well, we need prostitution as sort of a pressure release valve, because men have this insatiable need, they're going to get it one way or the other, and so it's better to have professionals who cater to men's needs, and then our daughters in our communities are going to be much safer. Well, that sounds great. In reality, if you look at all of the studies internationally around the world where prostitution has been normalized or legalized, those communities and those countries tend to have a worse problem with sexual violence outside of the sex industry. So it doesn't hold water. We need to reform our thinking. The sex positivity movement that our young people are embracing does condone and demand a space for pornography and prostitution, and that normalization on the part of our young people, seeing so many young people drawn into a world that really destroys their mental health.
Well, that was definitely informative, definitely eye-opening. I know a lot of people don't realize how close to home it is and how important it is to keep an eye out, to keep somebody from doing these kind of things, to have an organization. I will have a link to the Men Ending Trafficking website in the description, and I just want to thank you so much. I know lots of viewers out there who have daughters and even sons, because it is an addiction out there, that applaud you and your organization. I know, like I said at the beginning, that this is a very dear to me. Having two daughters of my own, this means a lot to me, and I want to thank you very much, you and your organization, for doing this. And I just want to wish you guys all the best luck. All the prayers going out to you guys.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, you can check us out. John's going to leave the link. It's menendingtrafficking.ca. If I can just leave you with one thought. This is a growing problem that is affecting more and more young people. We've seen a lot of tragedy. We've seen quite a few deaths and of young women. The thought I want to leave with you is this is a significant and growing women's problem in Canada, but it's only a problem that exists because of the behavior of men. We need to change that.
For sure. So, thank you very much. Glad to have you on. And again, Godspeed. Hopefully this can be dealt with in a timely fashion.
Thank you, John.
Time will always tell.
That's right.
And any help can help. So, thank you.
You bet. Keep up the good fight.
Yes.